Welcome to the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation's Live Better series, everybody. I'm Rob Girth. I'm the Director of Digital Media here at the Foundation, and today's show is Dr. Dan on gratitude, even when it feels like there's nothing to be grateful for. Dr. Dan is looking for a conversation, so to achieve that, we need to get some technical details out of the way. Let me turn it over to our operator for a second, Daryl. Daryl, why don't you explain that to everyone?
Okay. At the start of the presentation, all lines will be in an open and interactive mode, and to ensure the best audio quality, please use your mute function when not speaking. You may press 6-3 to mute your line and 6-6 to unmute. You may dial in to ask a question at 800-931-1309. Again, to mute your line, please press 6-3, and to unmute, please press 6-6.
Thank you, Daryl. And before I throw it over to Dan, let me just say this. We have a pretty intimate group here today. And so you guys that I sent a note to call in with the phone number, this is a really incredible opportunity for you to talk directly to Dr. Dan and also to give us some wonderful the first word that comes to mind is content, but that sounds so cold, doesn't it, Dan? But it's just a wonderful opportunity for us.
You're a computer guy. We can forgive you.
I know. I feel so digital. But it's just really an incredible opportunity, and I know I can see some regular. I can see Lori, who's a regular. But if you guys would just call in, we can have a really cool conversation today. So please do. So let me turn it over to Dan. I know you've been like all over the place in the last month or so. So you must have a ton of stories to tell.
I do have a ton of stories. I also want to invite people, if you're, too shy or uncomfortable to call in, please type in a question or a comment, and we can have a discussion that way also. So yeah, I this past month I did what every 67-year-old C6 quadriplegic does. I went to South Africa.
Brilliant idea. I'm sure that was easy too.
A piece of cake. Actually, the flight was, of course, long and difficult. Other than that, it really wasn't that bad. The roads were hard. Where we stayed deep in the bush, we had to travel over like 6 miles of unpaved roads, and some of them were pretty badly rutted. So, yeah, I had spasms and some dysreflexia bouncing around on that. But other than that, I went through Access to Africa safaris, and that's all she does is tours for people with disabilities. And her husband is a C4-5 quad, so she got it. I mean, she really got it. And a lot of my supplies were over there waiting for me. There was even a shower chair there, so I didn't have to schlep mine. And all the rooms, of course, had wheel-in showers, so it wasn't all that hard. But, it was as close to nature as I've been in the 33 years since I've been in a wheelchair. It was an amazing experience being with the animals where they live. But I think, and yes, the whole 10 days, I felt nothing but gratitude and awe. But what I really wanted to talk about was a day I spent at some place called the Special School. And it was a school deep in the bush in an impoverished area where they educated children with disabilities. All disabilities. spinal cord injury, cerebral palsy, autism, mental retardation, anything. And it was children who the public schools refused to educate. And some of these children, the parents came over and dropped them off, never to be seen again. So there was a little over 100 kids here. And I went there, and it took my breath away that it was all sand. There was one narrow paved path for my wheelchair, but the rest of it was sand. These 100 or 150 kids lived and studied in 3 separate huts. They slept on the floor, just grinding poverty. Their food was meager. There was no place to sit down. Bathroom facilities were 2 spotter pots or porta potties. And here there's these kids with intellectual disabilities pushing kids with CP. So what took my breath away there was I was asked to give a speech, and I didn't know that. So, I talked for 5 minutes. These kids were filled with love and gratitude. And the whole place was the most loving place I've ever seen in my life. It was amazing. I met the woman who founded the school about 10 years earlier. And she had to be in her 80s, overweight, clearly arthritic. She was on a cane, in pain, with a big smile on her face. And she lived in a shack on the grounds. She just got electricity, didn't have plumbing. There's no plumbing anywhere around there. And a big smile on her face. And I said, "You look very happy." And she says, "Oh, I am very happy." So I said, "Why? Tell me about what makes you happy." Big grin, she looked at me and she says, "As long as my hut is clean, I'm happy." It was kind of amazing, And what about us? We need more and more and think that'll make us happy. Or if we get X and Y, we think it'll make us happy. But look at these people, so filled with love. So I just felt gratitude being there, and I wanted to talk about that. That's why. I always feel grateful for my life, grateful that I'm still among the living, which is defying a lot of odds at the moment and frustrating my insurance carrier no end. But, I just wanted to talk about gratitude or whatever you'd like to talk about. So, there. Has anybody called in? Anybody have any questions? I see my friend Trish is hanging out over there.
Darryl, do we have anybody on the line?
Yes, there is one person on the line.
Go ahead. Who is it? You might be on mute. So to unmute, push 66. And go ahead and talk. Go ahead, I hear you.
Oh,
I heard you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. No questions so far.
Oh, okay.
Who is
All right. Who is it? Yeah.
Veronica. My name is Veronica.
Oh,
Hi,
Veronica.
Can I ask you a question?
Certainly, sir.
How come you wanted to listen in today? What were you hoping to get?
Honestly, I'm not quite sure. I'm a wheelchair basketball coach, and I like to sort of try to be able to teach my athletes more than just wheelchair basketball when they come to a practice. And I figured that this would be a good learning experience for myself, maybe for them.
What do they need to learn about? Besides,
well, that's a good question. Besides basketball, I think that they benefit a lot from hearing the stories of others and being able to compare their experiences to the lives of other people to gain a certain perspective about things that are good, things that are better than they thought they could be.
Yeah. Speaking of gratitude, what changed my life was when I realized I was still able to help other people, not as a psychologist. I mean, just by listening to someone else's story and putting myself in their shoes, or trying to feel their experiences and realizing that actually helped people. And once I knew I was able to do that, I figured, I could live a life. I could live a life where I could feel good about myself. So, helping others, and that's what I told those kids I referred to in Africa. I mean, my little 2-minute speech was, I said, I've been in a wheelchair for 30 years, and these kids, I heard a kind of a collective groan. It was interpreted into Zulu. So I heard a groan, and I said, yes, I have difficulties, many difficulties in my life. And they're nodding. And I said, but I want you to know, I said, I'm a very happy man. And smiles, I don't know if they were relieved or happy. And I said, I'm happy because I'm able to help people. I'm able to make them feel better, sometimes to smile. And I said, and because I love a lot of people, really love a lot of people. And I said, and a lot of people love me too. And I said, that's what makes me a happy man. And, those are the lessons for all of us. Being able to help others, kindness, generosity, compassion for others and self, it changes your world.
It really does.
It changes the way you see yourself in the world.
Veronica, if I may, what ages are the athletes you're dealing with?
The youngest athlete that I coach is 5 years old, and the oldest athlete that I coach currently is 21.
Wow.
And what I wanted to ask then for the two of you, I wonder what, like Dan, what you thought or what your sense was of the kids that you were in front of in Africa, what their level of gratefulness was, and then Veronica, I have kind of the same question for you as far as the kids that you're coaching. What do you think their level of gratefulness is?
I'd rather Veronica go first.
Okay.
Okay, certainly. I think a lot of it depends on the situation that they're put in and whether or not they are open-minded. Everyone has good days and bad days. But in terms of the kids that I coach, when they're put in a good situation where they can interact with other kids and feel like they're making an impact, they're very grateful and they're very happy because they can relate to another kid. They can teach them something about basketball skills, or they can relate to them in the fact that they have the same disability, or that they have, a certain commonality in their lives what they like, what they've done, what they've been through. But when they start to focus too much on themselves, sometimes it gets a little bit more difficult and challenging because they can get into a pity rut or a self-centered rut where they see where they are and where they want to be, and they don't know how to bridge that gap by themselves.
Boy, did you say that well. And again, that's what you just said about these kids is true for all of us. You know, when we get self-absorbed, we suffer. You know, and when we think about the welfare of others, we tend to do better. You know, the problem with these disabilities, like the problem with chronic pain, is pain, whether it's physical or psychological, pain demands attention. Our evolutionary brains are wired that way. You know, when we experience pain, our body-mind attends to that. It has to, you know, to compensate for the pain, to get away from what's causing it. You know, that's how we've survived as a species. The problem is that that's acute pain. Chronic pain, our brain still thinks we have to pay attention to it and focus on it because it's uncomfortable. And that's when we begin to suffer. We don't see anything else outside of our pain. And that's problematic. You know, and by the way, Rob, back to your question. My kids, they're my kids now. I just adopted 125 kids. They're happy. They're filled with gratitude. You know, they get meat once a week. I watched when they came out of that hut from lunch. You know, they each walk out with a sandwich and a cup of water or tea. And I looked between those two pieces of bread, and I know there was something there, but I couldn't see it. And these kids are happy. They're grateful for their bread. They're grateful for their teachers who love them. And P.S., most of the adults there aren't teachers. They're people who volunteer their time, these amazing women who are filled with love. And everybody there is happy. Everybody there is happy. I mean, these volunteers and teachers are happy because they said the kids are so loving and wonderful. I think the kids are so loving because they feel safe and they're with people who love them. It's amazing. It doesn't have to do with the food or the dirt or the surroundings or even running water. It's, you know, it's about love and security or safety. So, yeah.
And they're, just a question, for the most part, they're in constant contact with one another. There's not a lot of, do you think that is a contributing factor to it, like being in constant contact with other human beings?
Well, you raise a good point, and I agree. That is a major issue, especially for those of us who feel different than the rest of the world we see. You know, we go out and 99.9% of the people we see are different than we are, physically. And it does create a quality of aloneness. I mean, I think that's why these chats and this web page is so wonderful. It gives us a sense of connection to one another. Yeah, I agree. That's a really big deal, being in constant contact with each other. I mean, look, that's how AA works. You know,
Yeah.
these relationships get developed over time. And you have a sponsor in AA. And that's a relationship. And that gets forged between meetings. You have someone looking out for you. So, yeah, relationships are everything. Are everything. But I want to talk about one other experience. You know, I talked about those bumpy roads, and in one of these rides, my daughter was in the back of the van with me, and she knows I've got arm pain. She's seen it. But on this road, you can imagine how bad my neuropathic pain was in both arms. And, you know, I was wincing, and, you know, I know about the pain. It comes and it goes, and when it comes, it sucks. And when it goes, I don't know where it goes, but I'm happy. But there she was, watching her dad in all this pain. And the look on her face broke my heart. And the difference between Debbie and me was that I felt pain. She was suffering. I wasn't suffering. I was just feeling pain. Not that I enjoyed it, but it was just pain. There was no storyline there about woulda, shoulda, coulda, I'm self-absorbed, this is terrible, poor me. None of that stuff. It's just pain. And it hurts. That's all. But my poor daughter was watching me and feeling helpless. So there's a difference between experiencing adversity and suffering.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. My daughter's been teaching me
That's
lessons
a great
like
way to put it.
Pardon?
That's a great way to put it, or at least a simple way to put it. You can be in adversity, but you still don't have to suffer. Like, there's a difference between adversity and suffering.
Yeah. Yeah, I can only put it in simple ways. That's the way my mind works. It's the only way I can understand it. But yeah, I mean, suffering is really all about the stories we tell ourselves about our adversity. You know, it means we're victims, or they're bad, or, you know, our whole life is going to be suffering, it'll always be this way, or I'll never this, or I'll always, you know. That's suffering. That's suffering. There's a neurologist who's a Buddhist and a researcher, and he says suffering, stress is, or suffering too, is when you want the moment you are in to be different. That's stress. That's misery. Because it can't be, you know? The moment you are in is simply the moment you're in. Can't be different. You know, it's like when you're in a traffic jam. You're in a traffic jam. You get crazy when you want it to move faster. That's when you feel crazy inside. And that's when crazy people do crazy things.
I hate to. I'll just say this. So somewhere in the 80s, I went to some self-help kind of seminar, which I enjoyed, I must admit, but it was one of those 80s kind of experiences. And the thing I took away from it, very close to what you were just saying, Dan, was stress is the difference between what you want it to be and what it really is. And that's how you can adjust it.
Right. Right. I've got this fantasy. I sometimes channel my inner political cartoonist. So I've got this fantasy of you know, a God in the heavens with a massive TV remote in his hand. And every time he hears a prayer that begins with, I want, he hits the clicker and changes channels.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's,
Well,
Let me just check. So Veronica, don't hang up. Stay there. Is anybody else on the line? Darryl, do we have anybody else?
No, there is no one else on the line.
Okay. So feel free to call in. Anybody that's just listening in to add to the conversation. It is 800-931-1309. It's on the chat, so you can find it, 800-931-1309. Dan, how long were you in Africa?
I was in Africa for 10 glorious days.
And what made you, why there, of all places that you could go?
Well, I've never been there. And there's a couple of reasons, Rob. One is I'm 67, and, I feel good, but I don't know how much more time I have of stamina and energy. I can feel changes, and, my days of traveling around are limited, and so I want to take full advantage, of my energy while I have it. And given the fact that I'm a psychologist, I can work when I don't have the energy to travel. I can work then, and I enjoy my work, so, I can do more then. So, I'm still working. I'm still maintaining my practice, my radio show, and all that. But, I want to travel while I can. And then there's, Rob, you and I have a mutual colleague, and that's Gavin Kerr, who's the CEO of the Inglis Foundation here in Philadelphia. And I was chatting with him, and he travels to Africa a lot. So he got me connected with this woman who does Access to Africa safaris that I referred to, that you were kind enough, Rob, to put their webpage up. And I started speaking with her, and when I found out, all this crap that I usually have to worry about when I travel, I don't have to worry about. All I have to worry about is the flight over, and I just have to worry about they're not breaking my wheelchair, which is what I usually worry about when I fly.
yeah.
But all the rest, my God, the transfers were there. There's, I got picked up at the airport by a vehicle that was wheelchair accessible. That's the vehicle that took us around. Every time we moved from hotel to hotel, well, they're not really hotels, but place to place, there was a wheelchair shower in this vehicle with us that came from place to place. It was just wonderful, just wonderful. And the people were so kind and understanding. I did have one interesting experience, and that was when I was in public. We went to Durban towards the end of the trip. And at airports, we were at Durban Airport. We were at Dubai. That's where we stopped on the way. And people looked at me in the chair. They were uncomfortable looking at me. They glanced and looked away. Some people pretended not to see me. Not everybody. And that's exactly how I experienced it here 20 years ago, 25 years ago, when there weren't many of us out there. This is before the, whatchamacallit law, ADA.
Yeah.
ADA law. And, so we were in homes by and large. But, now we're out there, people look at me and they react the way they react. But it was, over there, it felt like it was 20 years ago, 25 years ago here Not a hostile reaction, just uncomfortable. It was really interesting to me.
I know from the multiple cultures we deal with here that it's a huge problem. Outside of the United States, especially, where whole cultures are, if there's something wrong with you in some way, you are shunned. Even something wrong, and I'm doing the quote marks with my fingers.
Yeah. Lot of cultures. Well, and we were like that too.
Yeah. If I may, let me ask another a gratitude question. It might be a harder one. You seem to be built to be grateful. That's just your mindset. And I'm sure you collect people around you that reinforces that and helps you build that. Do you have any ideas for the folks listening, or for somebody like Veronica who's working with people in chairs? How do you instill gratitude in someone that doesn't see it yet?
If someone is willing to make a commitment to change their minds, literally, change their mindset, and do some exercises to rewire their brain, then they start with this, and I do this with many of my patients. Go out tomorrow, or wake up tomorrow. Be aware of 5 things you see that you're grateful for. See, think, or experience that you're grateful for. And when you experience them, just feel gratitude. Just feel it, just for 5-10 seconds. 5 things. Do it tomorrow. And do 5 things every day for a week. Make a note of it at the end of the day, or when it happens, ideally. 5 things. Notice it. Feel gratitude. And it can be small things. The beauty of a tree, or now the color of a leaf. When I'm aware of it, I've had pneumonia. We've all had these coughs and chest colds. When I'm aware of it, I can feel gratitude for an in-breath where I don't cough. There's so many things to feel gratitude for. And as a quadriplegic, we've got so many more things we can be grateful for. My God, it's 4:30 in the afternoon, and I haven't wet my pants yet today. And so this is good. And, when my mind is on that, I can feel it. I feel grateful. I can just think of anybody who I love. And I can feel gratitude that they let me love them. Just 5 things. And the next week, increase it to 10. And the next week, 15. And if you can do that, by the end of the month, you'll start, if you can get up to 20, 30 a day, the world's going to start looking different to you. And
can I ask you a question, Dan?
Yeah. What have you been doing? What have you been doing?
Oh, well, fair enough. I like that exercise that you described, and I guess the root question that I had regarding that was, in my area of coaching, whether it be coaching athletes or just coaching people, I've sort of come across like 4 different types of attitudes in my line of work. People who are willing and able, willing and unable, and then unwilling and able, and unwilling and unable. And it's the last two that have that unwillingness that I struggle with the most, because they could definitely benefit from doing things like the exercise that you just described. But it's hard to get them to buy into it to start, like that first step. Do you have any experience with that?
Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, yeah, I have lots. The hard work with those two, Veronica, those last two, the hard work is yours and not theirs.
Okay.
Your work is to do that gratitude work and to approach people, especially those people in those last two categories, with your sense of gratitude and wholeness and fulfillment. I'll take another step. Can you find compassion in your heart for people in those last two categories? Can you find a sense of kindness and drop your agenda to try to get them to be different? Just find kindness in your heart. Can you try to imagine what it's like for them to experience the world the way they experience it? To experience their mind and their body the way they experience it? And feel compassion for them. You don't have to do anything or say anything. Just feel it. And it will change you, and it will probably change the dynamics of the relationship. But more important, you'll be more comfortable with people in those two groups. It's hard work. It's really hard work, what I'm asking you to do.
I can feel compassion for them, but it's hard to place yourself in someone else's shoes and potentially think how they think.
Oh, I don't want you to think how they think. You can't. I want you to try to imagine how they feel, how they experience their lives. Tell me, you don't have to tell me if you don't want to, but how do you experience your life day by day? You have a worldview, whether it's conscious or not. We all have a worldview. They have a worldview.
That's true.
What's it like? You know, I learned over the years of my practice that the best therapy is not when you come in with an agenda, but always come in with a question, whether you ask it directly or not. But what's it like to be you? Tell me your story. What's it like to live inside your skin? I tell people the world changes when you can approach people with a curious mind and an open heart. I mean, it sounds great, and it would make a great bumper sticker, but it's hard to do.
It is, but I think that's a good reminder. I mean, it's one of the things that our coaching staff tries to remember to do, but sometimes we get so involved in creating our plan of attack or a practice plan or an idea of focus for the day. So we forget to start off by asking a question.
Yeah. Yeah. Who are you? What's your story? I mean, that's the problem with medicine today. They don't ask who I am. They ask what my symptoms are. What can I do to change your symptoms? I want a doctor who says, who are you, Dan? What are you like? What's your life like? It would add 3 minutes, 5 minutes to the interview. But it would change everything. Who are you? What's it like? See, because when you go with them with an agenda to change, you push, and then they do the same thing. They're pushing as hard as you are. What happens if you approach them with interest, curiosity, with the only agenda is to understand them? Then they've got nothing to push.
I would imagine a lot more openness.
Yeah, they've got nothing to push. There's nothing to push. There's something called mirror neurons that I talk about a lot. And this, Rob, addresses your point and your implied point earlier about me and gratitude. That mirror neurons the brain is a social organ. So you notice that when you're with someone, you can feel their energy. When you're with somebody who's anxious, you can often feel more anxious. When you're with someone who's happy and filled with love, your shoulders tend to drop, and you feel better. So, I'll take Gandhi's quote about you must be the change you wish to see in the world. And, bring it all the way down to a neurological statement. You must be the mirror neurons you wish to see in the world. You wish the world to be. So when you approach someone now, you approach them with kindness. And what will happen to their brains, their mirror neurons? Oh, it's all so simple. It's just impossible. That's all.
Sometimes the simplest things are the hardest to see.
Yeah, that's so damn frustrating, though. It really is simple. It's so hard to do. It's hard to do because we've been spending a lifetime or generation after generation doing it the same way. Pushing harder and trying to attack things and change things. And, in previous generations, it was great. It got us through to the next generation, and it's improved more and more. But now we're just eating away at ourselves. So many of us are just so judgmental about ourselves and others. It's like poison, Judgment is like a little drop of poison.
Dan, I see that our friend Trish left us a question in the chat. I know she said she couldn't call in because she was at work. But her question is, why do some quads have the courage and desire to go to Africa and others can barely get the courage to go to Walmart?
Not comfortable with the word courage. The real, you hear me groaning here. I mean, the real answer is I don't know. The word's not courage. I mean, we heard from, Veronica, about these people who have connection to each other. So it's a lot of factors. I've got connections in my life, human connections, people, supportive people, and I have for a long time. That changes somebody's life. If you don't have that, you feel more alone in the world. You've got things like genetics and your wiring, although, to be honest, my genetic predisposition is more pessimistic, cynical, depressed. So there's a lot of factors. A trauma like this, can reactivate a previous trauma. If you were abused as a child or neglected or had abandonment issues, this could activate all sorts of other things, make matters worse. So it's not just a matter of courage. And I don't see myself as courageous. I see myself as desperate. Desperate to see stuff before I die.
Well, maybe, you kind of touched on it earlier when you talked about what I was thinking of as understanding someone else's perspective or point of view, and maybe it's telling that Trish uses the word courage because that's what she sees it as, a lack of courage.
Right.
And what you're saying, it might not be a lack of courage that keeps them from going out.
Right. And would you call, in some ways you could look at me on the surface and call me less courageous than I was a few years ago, because I'm not driving long distances anymore, and I'm less courageous about, say, going to the mall myself than I was 5 years ago. So is that courage? I don't know. I don't know. When I want to be judgmental, self-judgmental, I'll say, yeah, I'm giving in to my anxiety. And when I am not beating up on myself, I'll say, no, it's just the way it is for me right now. It might be about aging. It might be about anxiety. I don't know, but this is the way it is for me right now, and I'm comfortable with my life the way it is. So I don't know. Courage is a loaded word. I think to a certain extent we all have to be courageous, to do our lives. The world can feel dangerous. You got to be courageous to get in your car. Courageous or in denial to get in your car, knowing the risks. Probably in denial. So, yeah, it's I don't like when people call me names. Like courageous or strong or wise.
How about inspirational? Yeah, I hear that a lot from people in the community, that word really bugs them.
Yeah.
It really bugs me.
Does it?
Yeah. Well, it either bugs me or it makes me laugh. It's very hard to envision myself under that word.
Yeah, well, I guess I'd rather be inspirational than expirational. But you know what? When I think about it, it depends on the context. So if they feel, if their story about me makes them feel inspired, I'll say run with it, If your vision of me does that for you, that's great. That makes me happy. But if you say I'm inspirational to label me or distance me, when people call me strong, that's distancing. That's saying you are and I'm not. or even wise, when people call me wise. A woman came to me yesterday to talk to me about her project, and I said, what did you come for? What do you really want? And she said, I want some of your wisdom. And I sent her outside of my office to look at a plaque I have on the door, on my entrance door, just above my entrance door to my office. And it says, nobody gets to see the wizard, nobody know how. That's who I am. That's how I experience myself. You know, that people come in here and find themselves. They don't find wisdom, they find their own. You know, and that's what we do in relationships if we're lucky. You know, we get intimate and we find ourselves. And if we don't have a relationship, then hopefully we can do it with ourselves, and by ourselves and for ourselves. Veronica.
Well, I think that's probably a good spot to end up.
Yeah, Veronica, you still there?
Yes, I am.
It's been great spending an hour with you. Where are you geographically?
Geographically, I'm just outside of Chicago, Illinois.
Oh, well, I'm outside of Philadelphia, and
Awesome.
and we both have crappy baseball teams, so we have a lot in common.
That
It was
was
good talking to you, Veronica. Thank you for hanging out with us.
Thank you for hosting this webinar.
My pleasure.
And thanks, everybody. Dan does this the first Wednesday of the month, every month. So come back again at 4 o'clock on, let me turn my calendar, October 2nd, 4 o'clock on October 2nd, 4 o'clock Eastern Time on October 2nd. And this webcast will be sometime tomorrow. I will post it at christopherreeve.org/webcasts with an S on the end. And Dr. Dan is in our community at christopherreeve.org/Dr. Dan, where he answers questions there. And then you'll find other people that have questions and are looking for answers. And Dan sometimes provides answers, and other people chip in as well. So always looking for feedback and comments there as well. So thanks, everybody. Thank you, Dan, and Veronica especially, for making this a very cool show. I really enjoyed this. It felt very intimate.
Yeah.